The memory connection. How inner speech shapes what you remember. Those established neural highways aren't just influencing your self-talk. They're actively architecting what you believe happened in your past. Your memories, far from being faithful recordings of events, are carefully crafted narratives continuously shaped by your inner voice. This explains a phenomenon researchers have long observed. Two people can witness the identical event, yet walk away with completely different recollections. Not because either is deliberately falsifying their experience, but because their inner dialogue was telling entirely different stories, even as the event unfolded. Think about the last argument you had with someone close to you. Despite both experiencing the same conversation, you likely left with dramatically different versions of what happened. This stems from your inner speech selecting details to preserve, emotions to emphasize, and motivations to assign. Your memories are dynamic reconstructions that your inner voice edits each time you recall them. When you experience something while actively narrating it internally with emotional language, your hippocampus, your memory's filing system, and the amygdala, your emotional processing center, activate simultaneously. This dual activation creates memory imprints that are significantly stronger and more vivid than experiences that unfold without internal commentary. Your inner voice determines which experiences deserve attention and which remain in shadow. Consider what happens when you attend a conference or lecture. The moments you internally flag as significant, this is the key point, or I need to remember this, are precisely the ones you'll recall later. Meanwhile, entire segments where your inner dialogue wandered elsewhere often disappear completely from memory. This selective process shapes the narrative you later believe to be objective reality. Your inner voice functions as an active rehearsal system, determining which experiences get reinforced. Experiences you mentally review are dramatically more likely to become permanent fixtures in your personal history. Each time you replay a conversation, revisit an embarrassing moment, or celebrate a success internally, you're strengthening those neural pathways, ensuring those memories remain accessible while countless others disappear. This memory rehearsal explains why emotionally charged events become so firmly embedded in our personal histories. When something triggers strong feelings, our inner voice typically engages in extensive internal commentary and replay. I can't believe that happened, or why did I say that? Becomes a loop that cements the experience. The more you internally process an event, the more prominently it features in your autobiography. What's particularly fascinating is the bidirectional nature of this process. Your inner dialogue shapes your memories, but your memories also influence your inner dialogue in a continuous feedback loop. When your inner voice repeatedly references past failures or embarrassments, it's actively strengthening those neural connections while reinforcing the narrative that such experiences are particularly significant to your identity. For Sarah, memory reconsolidation therapy revealed a startling pattern. Her inner voice had been selectively preserving and amplifying negative experiences while minimizing positive ones. Professional successes were internally narrated as just luck, while minor setbacks were labeled as proof I don't belong here. This selective reinforcement created a distorted personal history that felt objectively true to her, despite contradicting external evidence of her capabilities. The therapy helped Sarah recognize that her memories weren't simply recordings, but stories her inner voice had constructed. She discovered that many achievements she'd mentally minimized had been objectively significant, while embarrassments she'd replayed countless times were barely remembered by others present. This insight was transformative. Her understanding of how her history had been curated by her inner voice allowed her to recognize its unreliability as a narrator. The science behind this therapy highlights how emotionally charged inner speech determines which neural connections strengthen and which weaken. When an experience is internally narrated with highly emotional language, the simultaneous activation of memory and emotional centers creates stronger imprints, essentially telling your brain, this matters, keep this. Mundane experiences, without this emotional inner commentary, often fade completely. This process explains why trauma creates such persistent memories. The intense emotional inner dialogue that accompanies traumatic experiences creates exceptionally strong neural imprints. The memory becomes reinforced not just by the original experience, but by the ongoing internal narration about its significance. What's empowering about understanding this connection is recognizing that if inner speech can shape memories during formation, it can also reshape them during recall. When you remember something, you're not accessing an untouched file, but opening a malleable document that can be edited before being saved again. This malleability means that changing your inner dialogue about past experiences can transform their emotional impact and personal significance. Rather than trying to suppress difficult memories, intentionally engaging them with different inner commentary can transform their emotional charge. A mistake that your inner voice labeled as proof of incompetence can be reconsolidated as a learning experience that ultimately contributed to growth. Not as artificial positive spin, but as a genuinely different perspective on the same events. For many people, this insight provides relief from the tyranny of a seemingly objective personal history. Recognizing that memories are constructions rather than recordings helps explain why our recollections often differ from others, and why certain experiences carry disproportionate emotional weight. Your memory is doing exactly what it evolved to do, creating a coherent narrative heavily influenced by your inner commentary. This doesn't mean all memories are fictional. The basic events typically did occur, but the meaning, emotions, and perceived significance are substantially shaped by your inner voice both during formation and each subsequent recall. Your memory system isn't designed primarily for accurate documentation, but for extracting useful patterns and lessons, a process your inner speech heavily influences. How to recognize your inner speech patterns. Your inner voice operates like a stealth editor, but what if you could turn on the track changes feature? Psychologist Russell Hurlburt discovered something remarkable when studying inner speech. Most people remain dramatically inaccurate about what their inner voice actually says until they're specifically trained to listen for it. The voice that narrates your life moment by moment often works beneath conscious awareness, coloring your experience while escaping your notice. It's like living with background music that subtly influences your mood without your explicit acknowledgement. Catching your inner voice in the act requires more than casual attention. Since the 1970s, Hurlburt has refined a technique called descriptive experience sampling, DS, that reveals how elusive our internal dialogue can be. Imagine your mind as a movie. DS works like a remote control that randomly pauses scenes, allowing you to examine what was actually happening rather than what you thought was happening. Participants carry a beeper that signals at random times throughout their day. When it sounds, they immediately document their inner experience, catching thoughts in their natural habitat during everyday activities like cooking dinner or walking to work. When participants first begin DS, they often report what they think they should be experiencing rather than what's actually happening in their minds. Only after several sampling rounds do they develop the skill to accurately identify their genuine inner speech patterns. This finding suggests something profound. Most of us are strangers to our own mental processes, missing approximately 85% of our actual inner dialogue while believing we know what we're thinking. The gap between perceived and actual inner speech patterns explains why merely telling yourself to think positive rarely creates lasting change. You can't redirect something you're not fully aware of. This is where practical recognition techniques become essential tools for developing metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking processes rather than being completely merged with them. The first technique that proved transformative for many people is what therapists call the thought bubble exercise. This approach leverages our familiarity with comic book visuals to create psychological distance from our thoughts. Throughout your day, whenever you notice an inner comment, mentally visualize it appearing in a thought bubble above your head. When preparing for a challenging conversation, and thoughts like, "This is going to be a disaster," arise, placing them in a thought bubble changes your relationship from, "This is what's happening," to "This is what my mind is generating." Brain regions associated with observational awareness activate differently than those generating the original thought, creating alternative pathways for processing the experience. Thought journaling, the second technique, provides concrete data about patterns that might otherwise remain invisible. Unlike traditional end-of-day journaling, this practice involves documenting inner speech in real time. When did the thought occur? What triggered it? How did your body respond? A marketing executive discovered through thought journaling that her imposter syndrome thoughts appeared most frequently right before client presentations, a pattern she couldn't identify through memory alone. The act of pausing to document thoughts disrupts their automatic nature, gradually building neural networks associated with metacognitive awareness. Have you ever noticed different voices in your head? The third approach, voice characterization, recognizes that we don't have just one inner voice, but several distinct patterns. Try giving names and personalities to these different inner voices, perhaps identifying an inner critic, an inner coach, or an inner child. When faced with a new challenge, ask yourself, which voice is speaking right now? Does this voice sound like someone from my past? Is this perspective helpful in this situation? This technique transforms overwhelming mental chatter into recognizable patterns with specific origins and functions. Digital tools have revolutionized how we track inner speech. Apps designed to prompt random self-observation throughout the day create fascinating datasets about individual thought patterns. These technological implementations of Hurlburt's method make sophisticated psychological research accessible to anyone. Would you be surprised to discover when and where your inner critic is most active? Sarah used such an app and discovered her critical inner voice peaked during transitions between activities, moving from home to work, between meetings, or from work to social settings. These boundary moments triggered automatic questioning of her competence. This insight was transformative. Rather than needing to change her entire thinking pattern, she could focus on specific transitional moments when her inner critic predictably appeared. What makes these recognition techniques powerful is that they don't require immediate thought changes, only awareness. This awareness initiates neural reorganization because observing a thought activates different brain regions than generating it. Every time you notice inner speech, without becoming completely identified with it, you strengthen neural networks associated with metacognitive observation while creating space for new patterns. The impacts of developing this metacognitive capacity extend beyond feeling better. Research shows that individuals with stronger metacognitive skills demonstrate improved emotional regulation, more effective decision-making, and greater cognitive flexibility. The ability to recognize thought patterns as they emerge, rather than after they've triggered emotional reactions, creates response flexibility that isn't possible when operating on automatic pilot.